All right, welcome into the Red Alert Podcast. We are live right now on the Red Alert Podcast and everywhere you can get your podcasts on YouTube and everything. We have Cindy on the phone today because she is busy doing her author duties. So and she's got a lot of stuff going on, so she can't tell what location she's at. This is very secretive. So
That's right. I'm
good to have
deep,
her.
deep,
It's
deep,
good to have
deep,
her
deep
back.
undercover, Joe.
Yeah, well, maybe you're at the Red Wings front offices, and maybe you were playing a role in Derek
I
Lalonde getting
plead the
fired.
fifth. I plead the fifth, my friend. I cannot disclose. I can neither confirm nor deny anything that you might be saying right now.
So that means it might be true, it might not be true. We don't know. It could be very, very well known that you were playing um, a role in things happening.
I'm a woman of mystery, and we're going to keep it that way, just to keep the intrigue going. So, but we do have a lot to talk about. I've got a lot of insight that I'm going to share with everybody today, and yeah, I'm excited, man. I think this is the start of some great things, but yeah, I don't want everybody thinking that this is going to be the be all end all. This isn't the cure all for everything, but this is a huge, huge piece, and it needed to happen.
Well, I think the last time we talked on the podcast, like we were talking about this team and how disappointing they've been. We were talking about like just everything that they were going through is just like kind of like they're going through the motions. It seemed and they weren't playing the way that we kind of expected them to play. And me and you have been hampering on this. Me and you both have been hampering on. We thought, at a time like the Red Wings should have been more offensive, like aggressively, and they're defensive, like a defensive hockey team, and that's okay. But like the reality of the situation is this: I think both of us at the last podcast we talked about it, and we were both we were empathetic, and I felt like going through the whole notion of this whole fan base, especially seeing their comments on the page and everything, they were empathetic towards this team. And I think empathy is the worst thing that you can have with a hockey team or any pro sports team. Like empathetic means you're basically going through emotions. Oh, they lose. Oh, we expect them to lose. Derek Lalonde's still the coach. Oh, we expect there. I think everyone was waiting for this shoe to drop because we've been going through it the last couple podcasts, me and you. His record in November and December through his career has been absolutely dreadful. Like 343 and then you go to December and it's like 410. It's like you're not really good in those 2 months. And those 2 months, we've seen it before. Like we talked about it before. They set you up for failure. Like you have to go do the whole chasing points at the end of the year, and you never know what could happen at the end of the year. You can have injuries like you had last year. The Larkin, where it basically was the end of the year. Like that when Larkin got hurt last year in March, it was the end of the year because you really can't lose a player like Larkin. And I feel like the way that Larkin's been playing this year, they're wasting a year of Dylan Larkin. So I felt this move had to come. What about you?
Well, yeah, it had to. I mean, and the fan base was getting ready. I mean, they were asking for this guy's head, and I understand it. But we're talking about what we discussed on the last couple podcasts, and there's a key piece of this that we talked about. It's interesting. You hear stuff, we talk about things on the podcast, then they end up coming out in the media, right? Either
Mhm.
someone in a presser says it or something like that. So, you got to tell people, hey, you got to listen to the Red Alert podcast because these guys just might know a little something. So, we talked about the fact this team didn't have an identity. We talked about the fact people were apathetic. We talked about the fact that there was don't everyone saw it. There's no passion. They weren't playing with passion. There was they didn't have a level of belief. They didn't believe Derek Lalonde could lead them or coach them into a successful season. You could see it. There was a lack of cooperate. You could tell, like in the background, just the lines weren't working right. It wasn't working. There was, and I think we even used the term. I think I used the word disconnect. Dylan
Yep.
Larkin said the same thing. There's
Yep.
a disconnect on this team. It was obvious. Now, my opinion was that um, the lack of winning on this team this season has had more to do with those things than it did lack of talent, right? Everyone said lack of talent. I had to have this conversation yesterday. You're not supposed to talk politics on, during the holidays, right? So it's kind of funny because that means that I can't talk about my work at all because, as you know, that's what I do um, for my day job. And so, sorry, so we're not talking politics. So what are we going to talk? We're going to talk sports, right? And the Red Wings came up, and I had to. It was a point of contention a little bit. We probably would have been better off talking politics because I think everybody in my household, everybody that was here yesterday, voted the same way. But um, we had a difference of opinion. There was still someone, my brother-in-law, God bless him, felt that we just don't have talent. We lack talent, and I kind of took it took him up on that, and I said, nah, I don't think it's a talent problem. We got Tarasenko, you got Kane, you've got Larkin, you've got talent on this team. You've got to bring it. It's not that these guys aren't talented. Then you throw in, Sider and Raymond. I mean, come on, you've got talent. I really believe it was how that talent was managed. And
Yeah,
so that's why this move that took place is really pivotal. Is it going to solve all of the problems?
yeah.
No, but I think you're 50% of the way there.
Well, I think if you're gonna be totally honest with yourself, like me and you talked about it, and obviously you talk about point of contention. Like a lot of people are they're sparred on who is to blame. Like, is it alone? Is it Eiserman? Is it the roster? Like, it doesn't matter. The reality of the situation is like, you got talent on this roster. I think offensively, you got the talent on this roster. Defensively, you probably don't have the talent on this roster, and that's okay. You know, you're there. You can have no talent on the roster, which the Red Wings do. They have Larkin and DeBrincat and Raymond and Sider and Evanson. I think it was more the way they were used. And that's why me and you are kind of hard on Coach Alone because the way that they're playing, it's sense from me and you, your perspective, because we've been talking back and forth, this whole season, and we've been kind of like, this is just not right. They're not playing the way that we thought they were going to play. But I thought, like, in the last couple weeks, it's gotten worse. Like, the team, like you mentioned, the team, like, they're not playing the same way that they were playing early on. These last 2 months have kind of been like the last 6 weeks, if we're going to put it technically, they've been really bad for this team. Like this team has uh underachieved horribly. They've underachieved horribly. And not only that, offensively, which is they're supposed to be good offensively, and that's why I'm kind of intrigued by Coach Todd McLennan because him coming over, when he was with San Jose, they were more of a defensive team because they had better defensive talent. They had Brett Burns, they had Mark Edward Vlasic, and they had some guys in the back end that they could use. But when he was with Edmonton, which was a more offensive skilled team, they were more offensively aggressive. I thought that one of the things that me and you talked about this on the prior podcast, when you talk about Coach Alone and this Red Wings team, and you talk about how they put together this team, like how do they schematically get better? Like we brought up Coach Dan Campbell, and we brought up Coach AJ Hinch, manager AJ Hinch for the Tigers. They knew that they were not good. Like Dan Campbell knew he was not good defensively his first 2 years, so they had to win offensively games. Manager AJ Hinch of the Tigers, he knew he wasn't an offensive laden team, so they had to win games with pitching. And that's just the way it goes. And I thought that's the thing that Lalone really struggled at was mixing up his coaching philosophies. Like that's what really killed him. And we've talked about it before. Like me and you have said it before. When you have a coach or you have a manager or a owner or someone that's in charge that doesn't want to change their philosophy for that goes against their ideology, that will be the biggest misnomer that you could have. And that's what did Coach Alone. I think that's look, Patrick Kane's not doing good. Tarasenko's not producing offensively. So you're kind of going through this motion of, you know, who's going to score. And obviously Larkin's having a good year. Raymond's having a good year. And Sider and Evanson, they're doing pretty good. But you had to get more offensively done because this team, they're built for offense. They're not built for defense right now. And I think that's what Eisman kind of figured when he brought in Coach McLennan.
So let's hope that he really pushes forward with a very aggressive offensive schematic here. But so long as there's an understanding that you don't have the team that he was assistant coach with in 2008. Okay. You don't have that team. So you can't
No.
coach him the same way. And I think he recognizes that. And you just demonstrated that really, really well, Joe, that he went from a defensive, model to an offensive model when he changed teams, knowing you've got to know what assets you've got. And you talked also about how um, Dan Campbell did the same thing. You've got to look at what you've got, and then you got to make your model fit the assets that you have and make the most out of those assets. So I really hope that he does that. But when they were trying to give this, folks were trying to give this argument that we had no talent before. Well, look how many players have left the Red Wings either voluntarily or because through a trade or something like that.
Yeah.
Jake Wallman being one of them. That people said, "Oh, you've got no talent," but that they go there and they're knocking that out of the park. Wherever else they're at. There's been many, many examples of that. So it's not a talent problem, it's a management problem, and they've begun to address that. Now, we still have a problem in terms of ownership. And I'll tell you this, the Lions tried to make many wholesale changes through the years, but the person at the top making the decisions until they switched and Sheila Ford Hamp took over, um, they had lagging problems. I'm afraid. Here's what I don't want to have happen. Okay, I don't want Coach McCollum to come in and think that he's operating under Mr. I, because he's not.
Right.
Okay, Chris Ilitch is a much different, and I'm going to be very kind about this. He's a much different kind of owner. Uh, he's 180 degrees from what his dad was. He's already had issues with being non-responsive to his GM. I know that Steve has been frustrated in terms of getting decisions or getting things done. I'll tell you what, Steve wanted to switch out Coach Lalonde long time ago. And I'm not going to say how long ago because I really don't know. But I can tell you he didn't make the decision this week. Okay. Um, the problem was that ownership, who makes ultimately all the decisions. So when people want to put this all on Steve Eiserman, does he bear some part of the blame? Yes, but not all of it, because the fact is, when Steve Eiserman is trying to make changes as a GM, he relies on he's got to get approval from ownership. When he
Yeah.
wanted Steven Stamkos over the offseason, ownership didn't respond. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why Coach Lalonde got released now and Coach McClellan got brought in now is because the owner, Chris Ilitch, finally did the math and figured out that it was no longer cheaper to keep her. You know what I'm saying?
Ah,
Um, and so he finally did the math and figured out that if his franchise continues losing, he will make less money than it will cost him to make this change now. And so, Eiserman is to a certain extent at the mercy of ownership to make decisions. And so, and again, he probably is realizing he's not operating under the old schematic either, the old ownership mentality and style. It's something different, and I don't think we can expect to have the same results, even if you put in all the same personnel. Heck, they could bring back, and I know they were talking about bringing back Sergei Fedorov to coach at one point. I don't care if you brought back everybody you had in 97, 98. If you brought everybody, and they put a lot of those pieces in, but the fact of the matter is your ownership has changed. That might be something that could be a lingering Achilles heel for us. And there's nothing you can do to change that.
yeah, that's the sad part about it is like the ownership is not going to change. Obviously, we know Chris is a little bit different than his dad, and that's okay. There's obviously differences when you change ownership in sports, and you change the way people have different philosophies and all that stuff. But if I'm being honest with if we're being honest with the people and everything, we're being honest with each other. I mean, if I'm Stevie Y, if I'm, if I'm someone close to Chris Ilitch, I'm basically telling him like, look, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you gotta take this seriously, or just sell the team. That's what it comes down to. Because look, you can't go in and treat this like it's a Little Caesars, because it's not. If you have an underperforming store for Little Caesars, okay, you'll fire the manager and then it'll profit will go back up, right? This is way different. And in hockey, if you in hockey sports like baseball, because the Illinois Tigers too, if you make a decision on the Red Wings or the Tigers too late, that could be the Achilles heel of why the team doesn't hit the strides, in the next year or whatever. It's sense of urgency because I think that's the most biggest thing in sports. You hear it from other ownership groups like in sports, like where their sense of urgency is always now, 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 now. You know what I'm saying? And I think with Chris Illich, like I think he's played this out too long where he's pissed off the fans, albeit that's the right way because the fans are going to speak their mind, right? And
Oh, for
then
sure.
obviously you're gonna hear it from your general manager, you're gonna hear it from your own your team president, everything like that. So you got to imagine that he's hearing it from both sides of the coin because if you watch the game on Monday, they were booing the team off the ice. And I don't think that's ever a good thing. And especially in a fan base like this, like I think the Red Wings fans are they know what they're getting themselves into, right? Like they know this is a smart fan base. This is a really smart hockey fan base where they know exactly what this team is going to do on any given basis. But I think when that St. Louis game happened and they got shut out 4-0 at home, I think a lot of people, especially like, you got the fans that were pissed off. I think the players were pissed off. I mean, if you watch the post game from Larkin, you could kind of tell something was coming down the pike because he was not happy. His comments were very, very, very telling. And then the fans were booing and everything. And then I posted the score after the game, and people were just, this team sucks. And when are you going to fire Coach Lalonde? And I was like, you know what? I don't think they would fire Coach. In my head, I was like, I don't think they're going to fire Coach Lalonde over the holidays. But after, that's potential could happen. And you said it to me before about them trying to, Eisenman wanted to make this move before.
Yep.
And if if Village whole goal was to save money, we are in a bad situation. Like we are in a situation that we didn't think we would find ourselves in. And it can't be about the money. It's got to be about how does this team work and how does it make your if you're an owner of a franchise, the way you make profit is winning. Like that's just the way it happens. Like,
Oh, no doubt. Like, Joe, for sure. I mean, try getting Lions merchandise in the last
oh
couple of weeks. Good luck.
no, it's not
Right.
happening. It's like last year. Like I remember going to the Red Wing game in January, right? Going to the Red Wing game in January. I went to the Red Wing game in January. It was a lot cheaper than it was in March when I took Tony to the game. And the thing of it was is the team was better. The team was fighting for a playoff spot, and the tickets were more expensive than they were in January. So it goes along with success breeds profitability. So that's no for Illich to make these to not be responsive to Stevie Y, to not be to not want to make a coaching change when Stevie Y wants to make a coaching change. I mean, eventually I think what you're gonna see from Yzerman is him calling out his owner. And I think if anybody can call out their owner and get away with it, it's Stevie Y. You know what I'm saying? Because like if
And
he
he
because
might
if
have done it already. I mean, he's not going to do it publicly. He's too
no,
classy of a guy, but and I don't know. I got to always say that I don't know for sure, but I would be willing to bet that they had a come to Jesus moment at some point because, Steve Eiserman's on the line here too. His reputation's on the line. He doesn't want to end a career on such an obnoxious note. I mean, whenever the end of ultimately his management career ends, he doesn't want to end it like this. So I think, what we got to talk about now that this is over, right? And we're moving into a new year. It's going to be a new us. It's going to be a new everything. And it can be. It can be. One of the couple of the questions I'm seeing online, Joe, and I'd like to get your take on this. Number one, is it too late? Has it been too late in the season for a recovery? Some people seem to think that this season is toast anyway.
uh,
And so why would you waste the money to pay out Lalonde, pay out his assistant, plus
Mhm.
pay a new guy. They thought that was kind of stupid and they figured, well, we're screwed anyways. So, number one, is it too late? Number two, what do you expect to see from Coach McClellan, and how soon do you expect to see it?
Well, I don't think it's too late. And if you look at the standings right now, they're in 7th place. They're 8 points away from a playoff spot. So they got time. Like they got time. But they needed to make it now or never, because if you get to January and February and you're trying to make up 8 points, I mean it's kind of difficult, especially with the math or whatever. But what okay, how did I put this? Okay, so you it's not too late. It's really not too late. I mean, we've seen the St. Louis Blues be in last place and then them make a coaching change and win the cup. So that can happen because January is the time when you make a coaching change. It just is. I think the Edmonton Oilers made a coaching change in December last year, maybe November, and they went to the Stanley Cup final. So it can happen. So you got to make the change now, because once you get into January, that's when you kind of get yourself in a bad foot, because we got that Four Nations tournament that's coming up in the middle of February, and that's going to take up a lot of time. So you're not going to be able to make the games back that you had in January. So I think this was the most crucial time. And will it make an impact, like you said? I mean, you have to think it would make an impact, because I think, you know, Todd McLennan coming in here, he's going to probably want to be an offensively aggressive team because he knows his team's more suited offensively. You know, even his defensemen that are on the team right now, like Sider and Edvinsson are his 2 best defensemen. I think we can all agree on that. I think all Red Wings fans can agree on that. Once you move past them, you know, Petrie is a better offensive player. He's not a defensive D man. Sherratt, he's a kind of a defensive D man or whatever. Hall, defensive D man. But I think you can get more out of your back end with an offensive aggressive approach. You know what I'm saying? That's what me and you have been harping on with Coach Lalonde. Like you could sit here all day long and talk about, you know, playing defensive style hockey and all that jazz. Okay, that's great, but you don't have the team to do that. Like you just don't have the team to do that. So I think it's the right timing, to be honest. Like this is the right time because you have 3 games coming up that are huge. Like you have 3 games at home, and we talk about being at home all the time and how huge it is. You got the Maple Leafs coming, you got the Capitals coming in, you got the Penguins coming in. And look, these are all important games. These are all important games right here. If you can go on a nice little 3-game winning streak right here, this could make the fan base more energetic. And then you look at, you know, you've already went through a West Coast trip, so you don't have to worry about that coming up. You know, you're going to be playing some good teams coming up, but that's everyone's good in the NHL right now. It's a good parity league. But you look at the Maple Leafs, the Capitals, and Penguins. Those are 3 games that I would assume could be winnable because they're at home, and I assume that there's going to be a coaching kind of bump with this team because you know usually coaches that come in they create a bump. We've seen it with Joe Sacco in Boston, and we've seen it with the St. Louis Blues with Jim Montgomery. So that's what I think. I mean, what do you think though?
You know, I'm curious how long it's going to take to see this change. Is it going to happen when they play the Maple Leafs on Friday? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen that quickly. Unfortunately, I think it's very possible that it's going to get maybe a little worse before it gets better. And I think people need to be prepared for that because you've got a whole new coach coming in with a new crew. He's got a new assistant. You're going to see there's going to be other personnel changes also,
Right.
that the fans won't hear about because I don't say they're not important, but they're kind of the minor players
In
underneath.
house, yeah.
Yeah, in-house staff. So you're going to see some additional changes, and it's going to take. There's going to be an adjustment period for that. There's going to be adjustment period for this new crew to kind of like get online together, not just between the coaching staff and the players, but also some of the other internals. So I think it may get a little worse before it gets better. I also think, sometimes psychologically there's something with this, this next week between Christmas and New Year. I don't know if everybody's going to be entirely engaged. I don't know what their practice schedule is looking like. Um, particularly. I have an idea, but I don't know specifics of what they're doing in those practices. I'm not privy to that
Yeah.
yet. But however, I will say that I think we need to expect it to get a little worse before it gets better. I agree with you. It is not the end of the season. It is not the end of the season for us. You cited the St. Louis Blues. That's my favorite one. I talk about them all the time. Um, but I do think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better, but only because there's going to be that adjustment phase. And you've got to be forgiving of that. You got to understand that that's going
Yep.
to happen. I don't care what organization you're in, whether it's a professional sports team or it doesn't matter. When you have high level changes like that, first thing that happens when there's a high level change like that, it always flows. You know what they say, Joe, it rolls downhill, right? Shit rolls downhill. And it does. And in this case, maybe it's the cleaning out of that is going to roll downhill too, but you're going to have other changes. There's going to be some organizational adjustments that have to take place. So what I'm expecting to see, I am expecting to see a more aggressive offensive game. I
Yep.
think I think that Steve and Todd are both on board with that same philosophy, and that's really really good news. Okay,
Hmm.
Dylan Larkin is on board with that also. So if you've got those three all that are already on the same page philosophically in terms of how they need to approach their style, I think that's very good because that's the beginning of an identity, right? And they've got to do that. In my opinion, they need to be the comeback kids. That's who they need to be. And I think because really, I, I don't I don't think that the fan base thinks it can get much worse. It will a little bit, but they got to be the comeback kids or something like that. They've got to start to solidify an identity, and maybe it's even more than that. Maybe it's whatever it is. They've got to start coalescing around that. So that's good news. Now they just have to, I think the biggest challenge, Joe, other than the organizational adjustments that have to happen quickly,
Yep.
quickly in order for them to have enough time. So they have to move through that phase, but it's got to be, they can't take their time doing it. But then what has to happen is you have to be able to get down into your locker room. And this is what Dylan Larkin needs to do. Okay. Dylan Larkin, it is going to be on him to convince, and probably some of the other veterans, to convince this room that they can salvage the season, that this new coaching team can get them there. They've got to believe that. They've got to believe it. Because if they don't believe it, you're not going to see too much change. They'll just go through the motions.
Right.
They'll call it in.
Oh yeah.
But right. So that's where it's going to be. Dylan Larkin is going to be key, along with a couple of the other influential guys in that room.
Yeah, I think this is the most intriguing part of the thing because I'm gonna upload some things, but this is a chance for the Red Wings to get better. And I don't know if you saw the page. I mean, I'm sure you saw the page, Cindy, uh, but the screen grab I posted the other day of what happened on the third goal, like that just can't happen. Like I thought the way that this team was playing, like it was one thing after another for this team. You know, they were not playing well defensively. We all know that they're not a defensive laden team, and offensively they were struggling with some of the things. And you like look at some of the statistics that they have out here. I mean, like I look at the Dylan Larkin and look at how he's been doing elite level play the last 3 years, and we're wasting it. We're wasting an elite level player the way he's been playing. You know, you're just wasting the way he's playing because he's playing at a elite level, and we all know that. And he's been doing a damn good job, and he's been trying to keep it on the tracks. You listen to his post game comments, and you're like, okay, well he's making the necessary adjustments. He's talking all the right ways, but it just he's not getting buy-in from the coach. I think that was what he said. You know, after the game, he said something like, if I remember right, he's like, we just need buy-in. And I go, oh boy. Like I listened to that one little thing, we need buy-in, and I was like, oh, he's talking about the coach. He's talking about, Coach Alone not buying into the way that this team plays. And okay, that's kind of a shot at Coach Alone. And I was like, I don't know what they're gonna do after this. But and then you like look at their standings, and they're 8 points away from being a playoff team because the Ottawa Senators are in a playoff spot right now. But what really pissed me off last game, and I think everyone that's watching this, they saw this and they were like, okay, it was this play right here. Now you don't think that this matters, but this was the third goal of the game right here, and there is that guy. I think it was Dylan Holloway. He's skating right down the middle of the ice. He's got players watching. He's got too many players on. They got one player. They got two players on one player. They got one player, going after the puck, and then they got two guys just, backtracking. Which okay, fine. But the reality of the situation is this is what we've seen with Derek Lalonde's team. They just every single chance that they had to be, you know, you would think that when you watch a team like the Red Wings and they've had a coach for 2 years, you would think that they would be all on the same terms, and it just seems like they have not been on the same terms. They have not been on the same terms.
Absolutely not. That's been the big problem. That was the thing. This was the disconnect that Dylan Larkin was talking about. It's so much more than it, there was a disconnect, there's a disconnect with the coach and the players. There's also a disconnect within the players' ranks. Okay, there was a disconnect to a certain extent, all the way up and down that organizational structure, from the
Mhm.
ownership all the way down to the equipment guy. And there was
Yep.
a disconnect. Okay, so they've got to fix all of that. That's why I said they went a long way in making this coaching change, but they didn't go all the way. And don't expect this coach to be the savior. That's not of this team. That's just not the case. There's several things that have to happen, and Dylan Larkin has alluded to that. Now, I had a different take on his comment on buy-in, where I believe he was talking about was a buy-in in the locker room.
You could be right.
They Because these guys did not believe in this. They didn't believe in the coach. They had questions about ownership and management. They just all along the way there's no confidence there. People talk about lacking confidence. I don't argue that this team lacks confidence, but I don't think they're not lacking confidence in their ability to perform, because this team is chock full of guys that have had a history of high performance at some point or other. I don't think they're doubting their ability to perform, but I do believe there was a significant lack of confidence in their leadership, and I mean that in terms of their coaching, their management. I will say that their management. There was a significant lack of confidence in management. So the fact that they've changed some of that, I think will help to reinstill some confidence, but only once they see something change. Like, just because you changed out the personnel, they've got to see a change in the culture. The culture is so huge. It is going to be imperative for Coach McClellan come in and set a new tone with a new identity. He has got to recraft the culture. It is
Yep.
absolutely critical he does it. That's what Dan Campbell did when he came here. That's what it takes to turn around companies, to turn around organizations, schools, teams. I don't care what it is. You have to have a significant and radical change in the culture. And so that's what I believe, where I talked about what I felt Dylan Larkin's role is. What's his responsibility? His
Yeah.
responsibility is to get these guys to buy in. But the new coach's responsibility is to immediately and radically reset the culture. He's got to do it. He's got to hit the reset button on this culture. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what he tries to do after that. And I hope that Coach McLennan is listening to this, and I hope he hears it, because I'll tell you something. This is the biggest Christmas gift he could have gotten right here, is this opportunity, and that piece of advice right there, Joe.
Well, here's the thing. We talk about Coach McLennan coming in here, Tom McLennan coming in here, and I think that he's talked to Mister Stevie Y. I mean, obviously he's talked to Stevie Y, but he was coach. He coached Stevie Y for a couple years. He did. So I think they both have an understanding of what it takes to win in Detroit and what they both are looking for. I felt with Coach Malone, honestly, when he was hired, I felt like, okay, this could be a good hire. But I also felt like at times, like especially the first year and two, like I said, okay, the first year I'll give him a chance because he's rookie head coach, right? Year two happens, year three it happens. Okay, that's it, done. Can't do it anymore. Usually you see a coach correct its mistakes. I think Dan Campbell did that. We've seen AJ Hinch do that. We've seen great coaches in Detroit do that. Like we've had enough great coaches where we know great coaching when we see it, right? So I think what Todd's going to come in here, he's going to come in here, he's going to know exactly what to expect out of this team. Like he's going to know exactly he's going to be able to get. And I think that Stevie Y has talked to him, and I think that Stevie Y is like, okay, look, this is where we are, this is where I intend to be, and this is where we could be potentially going, and kind of lay out the framework. Like if we get to the playoff spot, I'm going to be aggressive and try to get some talent in here, right? Or I might be aggressive now that we're playing a different game. Like, what do you think about it, Coach McLennan? And he's gonna also hit it. There was also an assistant coach that was hired who has been with McLennan in every stop. So I think that this is a great chance for the Red Wings to kind of move to another system and move to another like spot and try to get a lot better because just reading some of the comments that we got on the page right now, we have Marty saying, is it just a coaching change, or are they going to get rid of some of these old watch veterans? Well, obviously they can't get rid of them right now because it's the middle of the season. But Nathan says they're so happy they fired that loser, and then they say they got to spend a little money, got to get money coming back, and ticket sales are going to tank. I have went to the last 9 games, and it slowly went downhill since the price of the season. And then I think this coaching change is going to bring a new sense of. First of all, it's going to get the fan base re-energized. I think that's the main thing. Like the fan base has been slowly but surely going out their own way, saying like, "Look, this is not good enough. We've seen bad hockey before, but this is horrible hockey because this is a veteran-laden team and they're playing like absolute ass." So, so when you play like you have, like the Red Wings have had played, it's only up from here, in my opinion. Like the way they've been playing, there's no other way that they're gonna go downhill because they've already went downhill. Like I think that there's the best is gonna come for the Red Wings in the next month, I believe. Is it gonna fix the talent that they have on the roster? No. Is it gonna fix that they're defensively deficient? No. But this was a necessary change to, I don't know how you want to say it, to kind of move this team in the right direction going forward. I think Stevie Y couldn't sit by and say, "Oh, we're gonna sit back and just we're gonna let all these guys like do what they want to do." I thought that was I thought the longer this played out, it was going to be worse and worse and worse for Stevie Y. So he had to make this decision today or by New Year's Eve, in my opinion. And he did it today, and that's exactly what he needed to do. And we've talked about Chris Illich and everything, but I think this is a wake up call to Chris Illich because I think the fan base was more or less pissed off, and they were starting to get apathetic. And let me tell you something, as someone who does Lions podcast and everything, um, when you have an apathetic fan base, it's never good. It's just never good. So you get to a point where you're like, okay, we got to make a change, and they made a change. And even let's look at it in their own building. The Pistons. The Pistons have been showing up pretty good with a new coach, and they're doing a damn good job. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, in my opinion, because they got a really tough stretch. But I'm interested. I'm going to be honest with you, Cindy. I'm literally interested with how this team is going to go forward and what they look like in the next game. That's what I think about.
Well, I think one of the things we are going to see, and to the point of the individual who sent in that message, wants to see some more of the young guys. I think you will. I think you will. And the reason I say that is because there is a value in bringing in the new kids who, and I say the new kids, right? But some of the Grand Rapids Griffins guys, bringing them up because they don't have that sour taste in their mouth from the beginning of the season or last season. And I think that you bring in guys that you don't have to reteach, or you don't have to break old habits or whatever. You're bringing in something fresh that this coach can mold into what he needs for the model style that he's going to use to play with. So I think that we are going to see a lot more of the younger kids. I don't know. I mean, like you said, they can't get rid of the veterans, so they're going to be there. And quite frankly, those veterans are very important when it comes to mentoring these young kids they're going to bring up. Uh, I
Oh, not
would love to.
that, but get
I
them
would
through.
love to
Get
see more of Kosa.
Yeah,
I think we need to get Kosa up, because I think he's going to be end up being the backup goalie, if not the starting goalie next year. So I mean, because really, we're going to have another problem in net if we don't get that prepared, and I think you're going to see that. So I think you're going to see Kosa coming up, and I think they're going to bring in a couple of other of his teammates from Grand Rapids up with him,
yeah,
to get them playing together, to get that system starting to work together. Do I think it's going to? I don't think they're going to shoot through the ceiling this season. I don't. I think they're going to recover, and I think they're going to come close. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs? I won't
no,
know that for the next couple of weeks. Right now, I would have to say, if I were a betting woman, I'd say probably a 30% chance of making the playoffs at this point. But that can go up dramatically over the next couple of weeks once this coach gets acclimated, once the team gets organized around his plan, and his style of play for them. Then you're going to start to see those results. And then we'll see how quickly the wins add up after that.
yeah. I think the biggest thing here, Cindy, is a lot of people talk about getting rid of the veterans. I think you need the veterans in this moment in time because you're going through a coaching change. This is like kind of like a change up to some of the young kids, especially like Casper and everything. But I think Casper is really going to do good with Coach McLennan. And I think that if Stevie Y wants to make a roster decision that could potentially help this roster, here's what I thought, Cindy, and I want to get your thoughts on this too. It felt like when Wallander came up for last game, right? And they played Legason, which is Legason's guy. He's a guy that's been playing as a depth defenseman throughout his career. And here's what I thought. When they played Legason, I thought it was Coach alone sticking with the veteran to save his own ass. That's what I thought. Like, that's originally what I thought. When I saw the lineups and I saw Wallander wasn't in, I was like, okay, we got a problem here because I think that this coach should make a decision to try to protect his own ass. He doesn't want a rookie out there to make a mistake here and there. He wants a veteran who's going to just do the bare minimum. And I thought that was kind of telling. I thought that was honestly a ridiculous thing. And I thought if I was Eiserman, I would have made the move to fire him after the game, to be honest. But obviously, you're not going to do it before the Christmas holiday because that will send a bad message to future coaches and all that stuff. It's kind of like a messaging thing that you got to worry about. But
Well,
what
who's
I
to
thought
say
when it
that
came out,
Joe, who's to say that he didn't? Who's to say that conversation, excuse me, didn't take place and they just made it public afterwards? That's very possible. Either way, I think we can close the book, and I recommend everybody, man, just close the book on the Lalone chapter. That chapter is over, and now we've got a new chapter that's starting. And now, what can we expect, and what can we look for going forward? Do I think Lalone made those roster moves to save his own butt? I think you might be onto something there. I don't think he thought it could be saved, but I do think that he relies more heavily on veterans who can kind of, maybe he feels, play the game without so much of his guidance and influence. Because to be honest, I think Lalone had kind of checked out. He knew he was on borrowed time, and I think he just was sort of checked out in the last little bit here. So um, I don't know how engaged he was with everything and everyone in the last couple of weeks, and I think you saw that and on the ice. I think that became very evident. So I know that I feel, I say I know, I feel that this was probably coming for several weeks now. It just was a matter of ownership giving the green light to it, and then that was it. Um, so and the reason I say that, to a certain extent, I do have information that's very reliable from people who I trust inside the league that I knew people were being contacted about coaching here. Um, Way back in the beginning of the season, even before the season started. So just
Yeah,
so that that was actually taking place. And I know some of those people who were contacted. So or knew people who did. So anyway, so that's why I feel as if Steve Eiserman had kind of already had this decision made, but he was restricted by a couple of things, and then now it became just like I said, no longer cheaper to keep her. We're going to make the change now. try try to salvage the season. Try to see if we can get from the red into the black. I don't know if that's going to happen. That might not be till next season.
we'll
I
see.
also know that they were struggling severely with season ticket sales. Had been really bad, and so these
Well,
people had nothing to sell. They had nothing to sell, right?
to be honest, I mean, like if you're looking at it from a season ticket person, I mean, would you make the investment to be, yeah, I'm gonna renew. I'm just gonna renew this. This is great. We're
Yeah,
doing great.
no. So I think it was really a financial decision. But I'm looking forward to it, Joe. I am looking forward to it. I'm looking for a whole new team starting next year. Might take a couple weeks of some adjustment, but after that, by the time we hit mid January, I'm looking for this to be a whole new team, and hopefully that'll happen, because I think, quite frankly, that almost has to happen in order for them to have enough time to rebound for this season.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be an interesting time for this Red Wings team because they got a game coming up, tomorrow against the Maple Leafs, and I'm interested to watch from Traverse City what happens because this is a chance for the Red Wings to kind of get back on the right track. And I think if they could win against the Maple Leafs and they can potentially win 2 of the next 3, I think they put themselves in a good position. I think that this coaching staff is looking to make sure that they have the right mindset going into the new year because you look at the schedule going forward, going into the new year and everything, and there's some chances for this Red Wings team to really hit their stride because I look at some of these games and I say they're winnable. They're definitely winnable because I think the talent on this roster is good. I mean, you're playing Columbus, right? And Columbus is one of the worst Eastern Conference teams. You're playing Winnipeg, which is a great team. You're going to go on a road to Winnipeg, which is always a tough game. But then you got this stretch that I think is very, very winnable games here. Senators, you're at home. Blackhawks, you're at home. Kraken, you're at home. The Sharks, you're at home. Then you go to a road trip in middle of January where you go to Florida, Tampa Bay, and Dallas, which is going to be tough. But you come home and you go play the Flyers, you play the Canadiens, the Lightning, and the Kings, and then you go back on the road. And then you have that month. You got the 2 week stretch in February where you're going to have the Four Nations tournament. So you're going to have that time off, and that's going to be maybe a time for players to get healthy, and maybe they make a roster decision at in January where it kind of helps them out, moving forward. But I look at this and I go, there's potential for them to make some strides here in the next couple weeks, and I thought this move had to come right now. I think we are both, on par with it. Where you know, Coach Malone was on borrowed time. That's just the way it was. So
Well, I think there's a couple pivotal times coming up here in the next, let's say, 60 days. Okay. And I'm glad you brought this up. That Winnipeg game, that Winnipeg on the road game, is going to be a very significant game, because if this team can beat Winnipeg in Winnipeg and come back, talk about a huge confidence booster. Talk about proving that things are going to be different. You see, they've got to see it. And if you can beat a team like that that's on fire, and you can do that, that's going to be huge. So that's going to be pivotal, okay? Is going to be the Winnipeg game. After that, I'll tell you the next thing I'm going to be looking for is how do they come back right after that Four Nations game? Which,
yeah,
by the way, I don't like it. I like the All-Star game. I don't like that they changed it, but that's whatever. That's a whole nother conversation.
yeah,
But whatever.
that's a whole nother conversation that I thought was hilarious.
Right.
That's Four Nations. I thought it was cool because it for his personal, country pride or whatever. But I thought we left out a couple of nations that could have been in it. But whatever,
We got
that's
the
my.
Olympics for that, okay? We don't need it. It's like it's
Well,
stupid, okay?
the NHL and they don't want to get involved in the Olympics because it's
Whatever.
yeah, the owners are getting all pissed. But there's a question in the comments from someone. It's Logan Underwood on YouTube. He goes, "My next question is: Do you think it should be better that we have a new head coach that has more experience as a head coach in the NHL level compared to Derek not having any experience?" So, Cindy, I'll let you take this because you're a person with experience. You're a person that loves experienced people, not because you're an experienced person yourself, but because you always have this. There's always this thing that you say about experience. I've heard you say this a couple times, especially when you're doing some of your political campaigns, but I know for a fact that you love experience because you know what to expect at any given moment.
Well, and you're prepared, when you have experience, and you know what, I really appreciate that comment. Thank you so much for asking that. Because that was the one thing, Logan, that I was concerned about too, is is this going to be Derek Lalonde 2.0, right? We've got somebody, an experienced assistant coach, but no real experience. I mean, he's got experience as a head coach. He was in San Jose, did very well. Edmonton, did fairly well, although it had a little stumbling block there, but he did really, really well in San Jose. Okay. But they did not win a Stanley Cup, but made tremendous strides. So he was the winningest coach in San Jose in their franchise history, short as it is, relatively speaking. But that is something I've got a little concern about. I'm not going to disagree on there. However, I believe that it will not nearly be as significant as it was in Derek Lalonde's case. And I mean the lack of experience. And Joe, I always say here's the other thing, there's no substitute for experience. There just isn't. There just isn't. And you can see things coming, you're prepared for them. You don't have to figure it out on the fly, that kind of stuff. So I think given that, as far as from that perspective, I do believe that this coach is different than Lalonde because he does have that experience to a certain extent. So I think he's an improvement. Um, is there somebody else you could have gone with? Probably that was available. Not that was available. And I do know some
Yeah.
of the other people who were contacted. And I will tell you, yeah, this is probably the best out of the prospect pool they had for this position at this time.
Yeah, and I think that, playing on Logan's comment, I thought it was a great comment. I wanted to bring it up to you because obviously, you're an experienced person and you like to say experience really matters. And I think when you have a locker room that is experienced, I think this really plays into the way that they want to play. I think he's going to get more of the players' input into what do they want to do. And I think one of the first things that they're going to do when they get in there and they talk about, what do they want to do? What do they want to accomplish for the rest of the season? I think that's the first question. And then how do you want to accomplish it? And I think having veteran players and having a veteran coach is what's going to help you really move forward and kind of like, okay, we're going to talk this out. We're going to try to figure it out together and not, make mistakes and everything. And that's what I think they're going to do right off the bat. So, I thought Logan's comment was something that would play right to you. But I thought Logan's comment also said something to me and you about, I think we're both think that this is going to change in a little bit. But I think right out the hop, you're going to notice the difference. I really do. I really think that, coming out of this holiday break and playing the 3 teams that you're going to be playing, I think you're going to really notice the difference right away.
God, I hope so, because I'll tell you, these last few games have been brutal, just brutal to watch. I mean, it's like painful. It's like, oh my God, I feel it. I feel it. I don't think I can take much more of that. So yeah, I'm all about seeing a different energy. I'm all about seeing a different energy because even if they don't have the technicals down just yet, um, let's see if there's a change in the energy. And you all know what we're talking about because the fact is they look like they're out there skating with ice or in with lead in their skates. I mean, they're like there's just no energy there. They're so. Let's see if there's a change in attitude. Let's see if there's a change in energy. I think that might be what we see.
So Logan has another question. I think this is a good question to kind of end the podcast on. But He says, now that we have a new head coach, in your opinion, that what would be the best case that we finish this season out? Like, what would be the best case in your mind? Like, I think
Um,
the best case in my mind, I'll give you a little bit of what I think. I kind of think that if they kind of go out there and they get close to the playoffs or they make the playoffs, I think that's a successful start to the Todd McLennan kind of regime. Um, Obviously, I'm not expecting a Stanley Cup. I'm not expecting any of that jazz, but I'm expecting them to be a lot better. And I think with the way that this season has gone in the NHL, which is, you want to hear something funny, Cindy?
I could use a little humor right now. I'll take it.
So I got this NHL 25 game, right? This is a video game.
Oh
Anyways,
my God! Now we downgraded to video games. Okay,
no,
go
I'm gonna
ahead.
tell.
That's how bad it is. We're talking
No,
about
I'm gonna tell
people
you.
that aren't even real. No, go ahead.
I'm gonna tell you. They made an update where you can fire coaches. So you know what I did? I bought the game and I fired Lalonde every time I got in on the game because I thought it would be a better situation. And like, I'm bringing this up because it's to be funny also, but it's also to say, like, I didn't believe in this guy. I think there's players on the team that didn't believe in this guy. And I think the best case scenario moving forward for this team is like, okay, let's see what they can do. Let's see what they could do with a new coach, maybe a generalist, a guy who could kind of like, help the veterans, help the rookies. Like, that'd be great. Because at some point in time, you know, I thought Coach Lalonde was doing a disservice to the younger players too. Like, I thought Marco Casper should be playing more minutes. I thought, you know, there's spots on his team where I thought, the younger players could have helped out more, but I thought because, Lalonde's more of a veteran type guy, you can tell he's a more veteran type guy, that he was kind of hurting the development of the younger players. And I think this is a good shot for McLennan to come in here because he has been known to give younger players a bigger shot. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think my best case scenario for this season is just to see some tremendous progress. And I mean tremendous. What I mean by that is I want to see a change in energy, a change in attitude. I want to see him moving up the standings. If they don't make the playoffs, is it the end of the world? No, so long as they get close. I think your best case scenario is they make the postseason. That's
Yeah.
really because that's really the goal, right? At this time, no, the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, but is that realistic? Probably not. But St. Louis did it. But I think we need to make the postseason. But I don't think it's a total loss if we at least come close. Um, it may make them want it more, and it might start that momentum rolling that they can take into the next season, just like the Lions did. If they
Hmm.
start winning out at the end of the season, even if it means they don't make the post, it could be the start of that momentum that they need and the shift in that energy. So I think that that's my best case scenario is they make postseason. And quite frankly, I've got hope that they will. I think they've got the talent to do it. I think now they've got significant change in management that will be helpful. And I would be willing to bet you, as my grandmother would say, I'll bet you a nickel to a donut that the first thing this coach is going to do, he's going to come in and he's going to sit down with those veterans. He's going to bring Larkin, Kane, probably DeBrincat, um, possibly a couple of the other guys. He's going to bring them in and talk with them and say, okay, you guys are, the elite players on this team. You guys are the talent. A couple of you you've got Stanley Cup rings. You tell me where the problems have been. Even though he already probably knows the answers, he's smart enough to know that he needs to talk to those veterans because they have a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge, and they've been in the locker room talking to these guys. So they're going to get it from the inside. What are these guys talking to these veterans about? What's the sentiment in the locker room? And I think probably one of the guys who might have the most amount of insight on that, quite frankly, is Tarasenko and then Kane, because I think while Dylan Larkin certainly knows his team, sometimes you're a little, you can't see the forest for the trees. You know what I'm saying? So I think I think that you talk to a couple of guys who have been around a while and who have Stanley Cup rings, and you you find out from those guys what they think the problem is, because they've also been both of those guys have been parts of winning organizations where Dylan Larkin has not been yet. So, I mean, I think he was there in '08.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember if he was or not. No, he wasn't. Um, but no, he was there the last time we made a playoff run. But he has not been part of a Stanley Cup team. He hasn't even been close to one. So he doesn't really know what that's like yet, where the other guys do. So I think that's one of the things that this coach is going to do. Absolutely, I think you're going to see a lot more. Uh, you're going to see an acceleration in the development of young players. I think a lot of these guys that we've been hearing about and that we, Joe, have been talking about for a while now. Saying, "Hey, man, look for this guy, look for that guy." Casper, Kosa,
Yeah.
probably even Soderblom. Evans. You're going to see an expedited development of those players because I agree with you. They're not getting any younger. They're young, but they're not getting any younger, and their prime is coming up. Right? We know the prime for most of these guys is between the ages of 23 and 28. That's the 5-year golden period for a lot of them, and then you kind of start the downslope of a career a little bit, but that they don't have time to waste with these guys. And if you don't think these young guys are thinking that too, they know the time. They know what
Yeah.
time it is, and they feel they're going to be looking for other opportunities if they don't start getting some serious minutes. So yes, I think you're going to see that. Those are the two things I think you're going to see, and I think that's the direction you need to look at to know that we're heading in the right direction.
So Logan, he brought up this is he's bringing up good questions. Can you talk a little bit about new assistant head coach? I don't know much about him. So I don't think neither one of us know a lot about Trent Yanni, but I did some research, and I think it's very, very interesting the connection he has to two things. He was Patrick Kane's head coach his rookie year. I
Is
will say it again. He was Patrick Kane's coach. He was a Chicago Blackhawks head coach. Not his rookie year, but he was a Chicago Blackhawks head coach when they had a lot of young kids on the team, and then he got fired for Denny Savard. But I thought it was interesting because he does have a connection with Steve Yzerman too, because he was named the associate head coach, which means he was assistant head coach, which is in Detroit. He was named the associate head coach of the Syracuse Crunch, which Mr. Yzerman was in charge of. Uh, and this was mid-year. He was named the assistant head coach, and then him and the head coach led the team to a 22-14-2 record in the final 42 games that helped the Crunch clinch a playoff berth for the first time since 2008. So 2008, they clinched their first playoff berth. So I think what Logan's saying is I look at his record with the Blackhawks in '05 and '06, and it's not good. It's horrible. But when I look at his coaching career and I look at him being assistant head coach, he's been with the LA, he's been with the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers and the San Jose Sharks and all that stuff. And he's been with McLennan a couple times. He's a kid from Saskatchewan, and he's a defenseman. He was a defenseman coming up as an NHL player. He's a 6'3", and he's 59 years old, so he gets some of the veterans. But I think what I've taken to it is he spent time in the AHL. He understands what some of these AHL kids are going to want. These younger kids are going to want. So right then and there, they're going to be. I think this guy coming in, Trent Yanni. I mean, Yanni. Trent Yanni is going to come in here and he's going to be the guy that's going to be talking to the young kids a lot. And I think where this could really help out guys like Sider, Edvinson, Johansson, Willie Wander. I think he could help out Casper and maybe Berggren, finally get him to play some defense for God's sakes. But you look at Yanni's total, you know, his coaching career. I mean, he was with the Kings, the Blackhawks, and and now he's with the Red Wings. So I'm very interested to see what he does, helping out the Detroit Red Wings young players, because he did a damn good job at the stops he's been with, like in Chicago. He did a good job with the Crunch, which he has a direct connection with Stevie Y right there. So it'll be interesting to see what Yanni does. But that's a good question by Logan again. And then yeah, I think this is going to be interesting thing for the Red Wings moving forward, because I think a guy like Yanni is going to help this team out a lot. So I think that this is a good coaching change. I think it was much needed, and I'm glad they kept on Alex Tangay. I'll just say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I think here's my take on assistants. Okay, and as you know, I have several assistants. I have a key one, and I've got a couple coordinators. I've got several people work under me that I would consider my assistants. And the most important thing with assistants, assistant coaches or managers or whatever you want to call them, is that they are exactly what the head coach needs,
Yep.
right? That they fill in where they should be in terms of skill and ability, um, equal, but totally different than the manager or the head coach they're working for, the executive, because they will fill in where that person lacks. And so that's what is really key, is that they are complementary and that they are exactly what that head coach needs, and
Yep.
that they are someone who people can trust. And one of the things in politics that we talk about all the time when people go to pick vice presidents, vice presidential nominees, the cardinal rule number one is that the vice president is told to do no harm. You got to choose someone who will do no harm. And I think that that's the other thing, is that this assistant coach needs to be a compliment to Todd, number one, but also number two is he has to be the kind of person who is not going to do any harm. For example, if the head coach is going to take a very hard line stance and he's going to be the tough guy, um, that's great. You need that. You need someone who's going to hold people accountable. But then the assistant coach is the one who might come in and be the softer touch, right? He's the guy people can
Yeah.
complain to when they're pissed at the head coach or when they don't understand each other or whatever. So they can be the confidant, right? So that's another thing when I talk about being complementary, in terms of any complementary styles. But it's incredibly, incredibly important. I would say paramount that the head coach and the assistant coach have to have complete utter trust in each other, and they have to be totally on the same page. So while they might have two separate approaches in terms of dealing with their different aspects of their team and different challenges of their team, they have got to be 100% loyal to each other and on the same page. So those are the attributes that I feel are the most important for this assistant coach to have. And like you, I don't know too much about him. I don't know him personally,
Hmm.
never met him. I haven't talked to anybody who I know who knows him to even get any kind of insight. So I don't have that. But I think you brought up some good points. And I think you also demonstrated why this assistant coach, Trent Yawning, may be exactly what is needed. And we're going to find out. We're going to find out, but I hope so.
Yeah, we're gonna find out really closely. Obviously, the next 3 games are gonna be paramount for this team. The Red Wings play the Maple Leafs tomorrow at 7 o'clock. They play the Capitals at 5 o'clock on Sunday. The Lions don't play, so they ain't gonna interfere with the people's Lions, love. And then they play the Penguins on New Year's Eve, which is their, you know, they play on New Year's Eve every year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, Cindy. And when we talk next time about this team, probably next week or so, or maybe yeah, probably next week. But when we talk about this team, hopefully we're talking about it in a better light. And I think that this team is. I think now that Coach Alone's gone, they can move forward and see what's going to happen. And I think that this is going to be a good thing for the Red Wings to move forward. So we'll definitely be with you on the next regular podcast. Make sure you go to our Apple and Spotify, download the podcast if you like the podcast. Obviously, we got a lot of people listening today because there's a big uh, thing happening. So I was glad that Cindy could come join me on the podcast. She was dealing she's dealing with some stuff. She's got to get some stuff done. So she's all heads go. So she made the time for me, and I'm very fortunate for her to make the time, and we'll talk about it again.
Well, I always make time for you, Joe. Only you, my friend. But
You took you
no,
you,
I'm
took you took time away from baking and cooking and making me hungry. So
Hey, it was
I
an
appreciate it.
excuse to get away from all that. 3 days, I'm good. I'm done, right? So now switching gears to something else, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what things are going to change. Now, here's the thing: along with this change, they say sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, because now that they got the change that people have been demanding and that players have been asking for, and a lot of people have said, oh, this is the problem, this is the problem. Okay, well, guess what? Now you got no excuses for poor performance, right? What's your excuse going to be now? I don't want to hear another excuse for poor performance because there is no reason for it. So they just have to be aware of that now. They got to up their game and they got to bring it now. They got to bring it because we're not going to be listening to that same excuse. Oh, well, now it's the coach. Well, now it's this. Well, now it's that. Don't want to hear it. We're done hearing it. And now I want to see some winning games. Now I want to see some killer plays. Now I want to see some serious, movement on power plays and penalty kills, and I want to see special teams doing their thing. I want to see the offense coming out like they're on fire. I want to see defense diving, catch. I want to see them doing everything and anything that they have to do. I want them to bring a Detroit Lions grit to these next 3 games. You might not have your system totally online yet, but damn, you can bring the grit. You can bring that, go back to that championship way of thinking, and you do whatever you got to do
Yeah.
because now is your time.
Well,
And that's what the message I'm sending to the Detroit Red Wings today, Joe. I'm
that's
fired up, man.
exactly what I'm looking at for too. I know that, maybe playoffs is a little bit out of bounds to expect the playoffs. We had the preseason preview podcast. You didn't expect playoffs. I did. Who was counting? But honestly, like I
I
expect
am,
those.
Joe. I'm counting.
I knew that you were counting, but honestly, like moving forward, I want something that resembles what happened when the Lions went 9-7. They ended the year on a heater, and then they took it over the next year and they went to the NFC Championship game. That's what I'm looking for. Like I don't need a lot to show me that this is heading in the right direction. I just need something that's showing me that we're going in the right direction. Like even AJ Hinch last year with the Tigers, they made a miraculous run at the end. They had a 0.2 chance to make the playoffs in August, and they made a run and they started playing better. And I look at the Tigers right now and I go, I feel happy about them. I feel comfortable about them, right? I don't feel comfortable about the Red Wings right now. And if I could feel comfortable by April about the Red Wings, that's more than enough. Like that's more than enough to me to be happy with this team because you look at it now, like no one's comfortable with the way that they're playing. Obviously, the coaching change makes people go, oh, "Okay, I'm intrigued now." But for me, this is the most important thing: is to make sure that you make some progress and end on a good note. End on a good note. You got what 40 games left or 44 or something like that, some broad number, but you got the time to kind of make it run, and you in the next you know 10 games, you reevaluate, and the next 10 games, you reevaluate, and you'll know where you're at. And you're only 8 points out. The Red Wings are only 8 points out right now. So if you can make a run at it and you just miss out, okay, I'll deal with it there. But you look at some of the statistics that are happening right now, 29th in goals. I want that to go up. I need that to go up. And let's see where we can go. Like, let's see what's going to happen with this team move forward because this is a very, very good chance to end on a good note, in my opinion. And
Well, there you go. There it is.
like
Because you know
Tigers
what,
didn't
Joe?
realize it.
The reality is this. The reality is this. People have very short memories most of the time. Some people have real long ones, right? I got a longer one sometimes, and I'd like to forget some things. But here's the thing. It's not it's not where you started. It's how you finish. Not
How
just
you
where you
finish,
finish,
exactly.
but how you finish. Finish like a champion. You finish. That's what people are going to remember. In my business, it doesn't matter if you're 20 points down in the polls. If you win on election day by a point, by one vote, that's all that matters. Because you know what? That's what the history books are going to say. They're not going to talk about those 20 points that you were down. It doesn't matter. It does not matter, Red Wings, where you are. Bring us some 4-letter
Oh,
word, Joe. Hope. Bring us some hope. It's the season of hope, right? So bring us some hope. And I hope, by the way, just to watch this cute little segue, you're going to like this. I hope that everyone will like, subscribe, follow. It doesn't cost you anything, really helps us out. We really appreciate you guys so much. The fans in Hockey Town are the best fans on the planet. There's no doubt about that. And so, man, if you can just support your hometown team here on Red Alert Podcast, we would really, really appreciate it. And Love and kisses from me. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, and then you know what? Just follow us on there, and you'll get the next podcast, and we'll we might go live. We never know, but this is a good chance for the Red Wings to end on a good note, and we're hoping for good things to happen because honestly, it was getting a little bit depressing coming on here and talking hockey with me and Cindy because there was nothing good to talk about. And then Cindy's in this whole writing craze, so she's like, I don't know, this is. I'm like, oh, we're good, we're good, we're good, but it's all good.
I you know, thank God I have the best publisher and the best my executive producer that does all my movie and TV stuff is just the best. They are absolutely the best people, so I'm blessed for that. But looking forward to talking more Red Wings hockey with you, Joe. When we come back, I'm fired up, man. I'm excited about this change.
I'm excited too, and I'm excited to see where it goes because I would love to see it happen like the Tigers and the Lions, where they just end on a good note, and they give us something to be happy about. Because I think right now, all Red Wings fans are kind of in this hapless, hopeless, endeavor where I see it from the fans, like they're all hopeless and they think that the sky is falling, but I think they're a couple moves away, not moves in roster wise, but I think they're a couple moves internally from turning the corner. So we'll see what happens. We're going to talk about the regular podcast coming up in future episodes. Obviously, you could subscribe to JC Sports YouTube page, and we could talk about. I do some daily Rebbing content when I'm available, and there's stuff to talk about. So we'll talk about that in the regular podcast and on JC Sports, and then we'll see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey here on the Red Alert podcast. Now we got something good to talk about. So hopefully we come back and we talk more good hockey. So this is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, Cindy, but we're okay and we're good to go. And we'll see you guys in the next podcast.
Hey, we'll see you then.